a long ways to be together, you and me. We've come a long ways to be together, you and me. So let's hold on to each other, trusting and fighting while we live. We've come a long ways to be together, you and me. I learned that. Thank you. I learned that from Bernice Johnson Reagan, for many years a colleague here at the Smithsonian. My name is Tony Seeger, and I'm the moderator of this coming session. And I was, for a number of years, the president of, and then Secretary General of one of UNESCO's NGOs, informal consultative relationships with UNESCO, called the International Council for Traditional Music. And in that capacity, I read and supervised the scientific evaluation of dozens and dozens of masterpiece nominations. And one of the things that struck me about the transnational aspect of the UNESCO Declaration of 2003 is the difficulty of translating these concepts from one country to another, and the variety of ministries of culture and policies that are trying to put these into place. The big challenge for intangible cultural heritage within a UNESCO scheme is that the United Nations is an organization of states, of nation states, and culture, music, dance, and ways of living and being don't confine themselves to states. They have been moving all around the world for a long time, and all the more so in this era of refugees and migrations. The concept of nation state is called into question in many places, and certainly within culture it is a problem. And in the nominations for the masterpieces and for the list, it's always a little complicated because of which country will claim which piece of intangible heritage when in fact both of them may have a long history of it. And will they agree to claim it together? The neighbors are often the very ones who won't agree to do that. So the challenges of transnational culture is one that is going to preoccupy us for this part of the afternoon. This morning we had brilliant presentations on national cultural ways of sort of working with ICH, including the terminology that's different in different places, how the terminology has changed, and also including the way that grassroots organizations can work in a local area to use the potential of the legislation to meet their own goals. UNESCO is responsible for another problem, another challenge, and that is the separation of tangible cultural heritage from intangible cultural heritage and from world ecological sites. That grows out of, I believe, my interpretation is the bureaucracy. It's much easier to create something new than to change something that already exists. And cultural heritage meant within UNESCO monuments, buildings, and tangible heritage. To create an appreciation of intangible, of the rest of heritage, which is in the knowledge, in the songs, in the dance, rather than changing the meaning of cultural heritage, they invented a new term, intangible cultural heritage. And the geographic areas of sort of natural beauty were further separated. And yet, as all of you know in this room, any particular piece of heritage is often very much part of a place, has tangible and intangible components. And perhaps the Chinese are, as it was presented today, their ecological areas, or the cultural folk and ecology areas are precisely trying to come up with a way to overcome the divisions that that the organization itself created by its own internal organization and history. We have four presenters in the next section, and they're all going to be dealing with transnational theory and practice in action. The first person who will be presenting is Danny Jung. He's an artist from Hong Kong. He's a founding member and co-artistic director of Zuni Icosahedron, and he will have to correct me if I'm wrong, an experimental multi-arts and cultural organization based in Hong Kong. He's chairperson of the Hong Kong Institute of Contemporary Culture. He's recognized as an artistic pioneer and creative director. He produced work and collaborations of different media, including animation, film, video, visual and installation art, and performance. If you've seen the wonderful construction of bamboo on the mall with all of its moving parts that make sound in the wind, that's one of his projects as well. He studied architecture and urban planning in the United States and co-founded the seminal Asian American arts organization Basement Workshop in New York's Chinatown before returning to Hong Kong in the mid-1970s. Since the 1990s, I'm very sorry, Mr. Jung. Since the 1990s, it seems so long ago, Mr. Jung has been collaborating with master and emerging artists to bring traditional performing arts into contemporary theater. He has been recognized for his involvement in international cultural exchange and policy work, including as a laureate in the 2014 Fukuoka Arts and Culture Prize. Please, are you in the room? Oh, there you are.
Yes, I'm the one who have this gateway at the festival. I look forward to hearing your comments and critiques. But I'm not here to talk about the gateway. But I still have to talk about it because this is a commission by the Smithsonian Institute. I'm very grateful. What attracted me to do this is because it's a site-specific work, and I picked the site. Independent mall, I think, has certain meaning in it. And gateway, the wall, the gateway, and the statue, all these three elements of my installation. I think all these three elements are integrated into what I look at public arts and public space. And I think Folklife is site-specific. It grown from the ground. And I want to do something which come from the ground and relate to the site. And since we are in Washington, D.C., and since we are right in front of the mall, this is what I did. But then I'm not here to talk about that. Because I practice as a theater director. And I will talk about a project that I've been involved in the last 4 or 5 years. In year 2010, I was invited by the Japan government to direct a work for the Japan Pavilion in the World Expo. I was kind of surprised why they come to me. But then later I had a better understanding that it's very marketing. It's a very strategic thing to have a Chinese director directing something in a Japan pavilion. So I counter-proposed to the Japan government several concepts. The first one, I said to them, I want this to be a collaboration between Nanjing and Dongjing, Tokyo and Nanjing. I just want this project to be related to Nanjing and Dongjing. The second proposal I had with them is I want this to be related to the oldest form of Chinese theater, one of the oldest form, the Kun theater, and also No theater, the oldest Japanese form of theater, one of them. They accept all the terms. So it started my collaboration with No artist, No masters, and Kun artists and Kun masters. From that point onward, I have developed many conferences. A as you know, I'm not academic, but I'm very concerned about the root of how things are created. So I got the No Institution and the Kun Institution together, and we did several in-depth discussion about how institution affects arts. And we talk about institution including the financial institution, the marketing institution, and the backstage institution, and human resources development institution, all the way to architecture institution, which end up discussing about space, about how for the last 600 years, no opera maintained its stage. They insisted on keeping the stage as it is. And Kun was very flexible, was keep changing the stage. But then how it affects the Kun artist and how it affects the No artist. Of course, the Kun artists start to using mics when they were performing, when they have to perform for a 3,000 audience. And then the No artists never use mics. I found that very fascinating, but what really interests me is I really want the practicing artists also to share with me our concern about how institution and infrastructure affects us in creating our work and how we look at it. Actually, it's not only what I just mentioned, it's more than just the physical aspects or the financial aspects or the economic aspects or the political aspects, but historical aspects as well. What is preserving tradition? When we talk about intangible cultural heritage, are we talking about something that's 50 years old, or 60 years old, or 100 years old, 200 years old? So the artists I met, I mean, of course, they inherited from their masters, so maybe 2 generations. So I always ask them, what was Kun opera like in Qing Dynasty, or Taiping Rebellion, or late Ming, or the Southern Ming? So they will say, they will try to explain to me, and I always ask them from the text that were there any variations throughout the years. Those are some of the very interesting discussion during the course of interacting with the Kun opera artist and the No artist. What I'm about to show you is a collaboration that I had with the Kun and No, based on a script which is by a Singaporean playwright, the late Guo Baokun. He was very much inspired by ghosts. So he wrote this text which is about the spirits. And I kept explaining to my fellow collaborator, I said that, you know, yeah, artists are like spirits. They are everywhere. And sometimes bureaucrats are afraid of artists because they can be everywhere. And they are uncontrollable, it seems like. And they seem to have some power. Okay. So we use that as a startup point, and we discuss about space. So in the spirits play. As you can see, I work with the No artists, and I asked them whether they would consider take away their mask. So they took off their mask, and it looks like they're still wearing another mask, which is very interesting. So the first image you will see the No master. He is from the Texian group, which is one of the 6 major No opera company in Japan. And then you will see also the Kun artist who tried to use mask, which I told them that actually in No theater in China, there's a lot of masks. So they created some mask specifically for us, a joint effort with the No people. But when you see the clips, you will see how I was explaining to them about space. So that was part of the discussion. Another part of the discussion was about vocal. I asked the No and the Kun masters to go back to the training of the vocal when they were a kid. So they have this jamming between No and Kun. Okay, I think I should start showing the video. It's more interesting than my talk.
No? Up? Hello? All right. We will go on now to the next speaker, who is Kathryn Coney-Ali from the Lamu Cultural Museum and World Monuments Fund in Kenya. And she will be presenting in just a minute. Is it okay? Okay. Please welcome her.
Good afternoon. My name is Kathryn Coney-Ali. I am a cultural heritage consultant.
I'm so sorry. I have a bio to read. Will you let me read it?
Yes, sure.
Oh, this is so embarrassing. She is an independent cultural heritage consultant. Her clients have included UNESCO and the National Museums of Kenya. She served as collections and exhibition registrar at the Reginald F. Lewis Museum in Maryland, African American History and Culture, and has also worked at the Smithsonian National Museum of the American Indian and at the National Endowment for the Arts. Originally from the United States, Ms. Coney-Ali now lives in Lamu, Kenya. Together with her husband, Mohammed, Ms. Coney-Ali is working hard to preserve Lamu's cultural traditions. They have been instrumental to curator Preston Scott on the coastal components of the 2014 Smithsonian Folklife Festival Kenya Mambo Poa program, and she is currently writing a book on Swahili handicraft. My deepest apologies. Now I'd like to welcome you back.
Thank you very much. Again, I am Kathryn Coney-Ali, a cultural heritage consultant. I'm originally from Washington, D.C., and I want to extend a thanks to the Smithsonian for inviting me back to my home, my first love, the Smithsonian. And I would like to extend a warm welcome and a hello to Dr. Hassan Wario, he's the cabinet minister for the culture and sports and arts of Kenya, and our staff from the National Museums of Kenya, Dr. Purity and Dr. Yasin Ahmed. Just a little bit about, I actually live in the coastal region of Kenya, and we live in small islands off the northern coast of Kenya in a community called Lamu. Lamu is located off the East African coast of the Indian Ocean. Lamu's surviving historic cultural traditions and architectures fuses Arab, Indian, and Persian styles, reflecting the town's past role as an Indian Ocean trade center. Lamu is home to one of Kenya's first landscapes inscribed on the UNESCO World Heritage List. It has the largest number of documented historical sites and monuments in the country. I just wanted to give you a little backdrop about Lamu in case you didn't know anything about it. And unfortunately, I don't have any pictures. I wanted to show a film footage of, okay. I wanted to show a brief footage of some of our traditional heritage and performance and dance, but unfortunately, I don't have the connector to connect it to the screen up above. So the preservation of Lamu's cultural heritage is important to the cultural integrity and the survival of the indigenous community. The purpose of the Lamu Watch, which I am a part of, I actually nominated Lamu through UNESCO to be a part of the World Monuments 2004 watch list. The purpose of Lamu Watch List 2014 is to engage and educate the community through activities that encourage interest and stewardship in the rich heritage of Lamu's culture. Presently, one of the most apparent community challenges is the lack of education pertaining to the historical sites and monuments. And what I want to talk to you about today is challenges in confronting the preservation of Swahili culture heritage. For a lot of the community, a lot of the local people live with these sites every day and live with their traditions every day, but aren't really that familiar with it and understand it in its historical context. Even if they have visited some of the sites in the area, such as Lamu Fort, some of the tombs around the community, even some of the sites at some of the historical sites on other islands, they don't know the historical relevance. And one of the things that we were trying to do is engage the community in taking ownership of their cultural heritage. The lack of interest in the history or the location of the various sites throughout the community is due to an ongoing interest in business and tourism in the region, where a lot of the young people are losing their how can I say it, their interest in promoting the history that is currently there. They see a lot of the Western culture coming into the community, and they're actually imitating and trying to adapt to that community. And let me say this as a sidebar. Lamu, the community, Swahili culture is Islamic. And so with that, there is a conflict with the cultural integrity of the people that are in this region. Lamu is a major Kenya coastal tourist attraction, and unfortunately, now with the anticipated increase in tourism, the region and its culture, which includes traditional heritage and historical structures, are at risk with the uncontrolled development. Currently, I have to say this, currently the national government has a partnership with neighboring countries, South Sudan and Ethiopia, to build a port, which is referred to as LAPSET. This development will build what is to be the largest port in East Africa, as well as build roads to connect South Sudan and Ethiopia to Lamu's new port. With no environmental heritage or heritage impact assessment completed before the start of the construction, the World Heritage Convention cited that Lamu World Heritage Site was in danger of losing its status. This threat led to the inclusion of Lamu town and its surrounding historical sites and monuments to be included on the 2014 World Monuments Watch List. So I have to backtrack just a little bit, because since Lamu is on the World Watch List, the World Monuments Watch List, the actual government has been working, local government has been working with the community and the National Museums of Kenya and UNESCO to basically implement a heritage impact assessment as well as an environmental impact assessment. The challenges specific to this community and Swahili culture stem from communal and national inability to classify who are the Swahili, which there is a national issue of recognizing the coastal ethnic group. What is their history, which there is a national misrepresentation of the ethnic group's history, and how has their traditional heritage evolved and adapted with modernity. Some of the areas that we are trying to focus in the community, and now I'm working with, through UNESCO, with the local government, as well as the National Museums of Kenya, Lamu Museum, to develop capacity building programs that will actually empower and educate the community to take ownership of their traditional heritage. There are oral traditions that are being lost. Language corruption. Swahili in its original form is written in the Arabic script. So we're looking at calligraphy. Generation to generation skill development, which deals with handicraft. Traditionally, handicraft was a craft that was passed down to one family member to another. If I'm a father or a mother, I'm teaching my child my craft, and the business resides within the community. Nowadays, a lot of the young people are not interested in learning these crafts. For instance, if you have been out to the mall, you'll see Ali Skender building a dhow. That craft was passed down from his father to him. You'll see Ahmed Ngolda doing kofia making. So with that, you don't have the young people who want to learn these crafts, so they have to teach them to people outside of the community. Also, there is traditional dress. A lot of the traditional dress is being substituted with Western style dress. Traditional medicine is another issue. We have a lot of traditional healing practices that are becoming obsolete. One of the connections with the Chinese is the ability to heal broken bones. There's only one traditional medicine person or healer that is able to repair bones in Lamu. And he doesn't have anyone who is interested in his craft or his skill. With the influx of new ethnic groups and international people to the region for the building of LabSet, the cultural integrity has become endangered. These new influences have begun to promote a false perspective of what Swahili culture is. Along with my husband, Muhammad Ali, we are working with UNESCO, the National Museums in Kenya, and the local Lamu County government to promote, empower, and to educate in cultural heritage preservation through capacity building. And with that, I want to open the floor when we have our discussion, especially with the Chinese community, because I served on a panel yesterday on the Eco Museum, Living Heritage, and I thought it was interesting how they were promoting and preserving the history of that village. And because Lamu has a lot of different villages made up of Swahili people who speak different dialects. And it's how can we work together to preserve this heritage for the future generation, and especially with the port that's coming to Lamu, and we have an international community coming there, and there's no jobs for the people there. And what we think of as Swahili culture now is being promoted as something else that's not Swahili culture, and especially the language corruption. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. That illustrates a number of the issues that this session is about. Our next speaker is an artist. She is Vera Nakonechny, a 2014, right now, National Heritage Fellow. Congratulations, it was just announced. She is an expert in the art of crafting traditional Ukrainian textiles, including embroidery, beadwork, weaving, and other traditional forms related to textiles and adornment. And her work preserves and cultivates these Ukrainian traditions both in the United States and in the Ukraine. She was born in 1947 and settled in Germany to Ukrainian parents. Her family emigrated to Brazil and then the United States and settled in Philadelphia, where she was able to further her education in Ukrainian folk arts from the Ukrainian Women's League of America and artists, including the 1999 NEA Heritage Fellow, Eudokia Sorochanuk. You'll have to correct me later. When Ukraine became independent in 1991, following the breakup of the Soviet Union, she was able to travel to the country for the first time. She discovered that because the traditional arts were forbidden under the Soviet Union, many of these traditions were in danger of being lost in the Ukraine. Therefore, in addition to her work as a master teacher in the Philadelphia community, where she has received apprenticeship grants from the Pennsylvania Council on the Arts, she has also shared her knowledge in Ukraine through the workshops and discussions and has become an associate to the National Center of Folk Culture, the Ivan Honchar Museum in Kiev. Her work has been included in exhibits both in the United States and Ukraine, and she was recently named, as I said, the 2014 National Heritage Fellow in the United States, highest honor for traditional artists. In 2008, she earned a Pew Fellowship Award from the Pew Center for Arts and Culture, and in 2011, she received the Leeway Foundation Transformational Award. Please come and share your wisdom with us.
Sally's here to hold my hand. Thank you. Thank you for this ability to be able to be here among such a great artist and people, and just thank you for this opportunity. and also to be able to share a little bit about my craft. And the reason, am I okay? Closer to the mic, don't do mics. I started very young to do my art. And when I came to the United States, as I was doing it and embroidering, I would go and ask people from the community that knew, museum people and all. And everything that I picked to do, they say, well, this is not Ukrainian. Well, that's not Ukrainian. And I got so upset. I said, so what is Ukrainian? You know? I apologize, I'm also a crier. So please ignore that. And so that promoted me to search and look for the pure art. And it took me on a really interesting ride. I'm sorry. Oh, yeah, this is my MO. But the main thing was to be able to go and search for things and get firsthand information and go through the villages and learn from people that are still doing, and a lot of it is dying out. Because I have searched for certain things. I am trying to weave a belt that no one knows. And I put out on media, please, if anyone knows how, please teach me. But in here it also goes that over 50 years of the communist occupation, the communists did a very interesting thing, that they wanted to create a communist art. Not Ukrainian, not this. Whoever belonged to the communist thing, it became a communist art. So it became a conglomerate of things, and you had to search for your own things. And so this is what got me going. And so since '92, I've been traveling to Ukraine. I have learned a lot here from teachers and, that were able to teach me the pure forms and be able to go to Ukraine and show them there. And so this has been great in that sense. Needless to say, this award just put me way up there. Now, which I humbly thank you. But there is a big, big lost between time. I know I'm jumping. I hope people could follow me. Because of that gap of time, people stopped doing it. Were afraid that the family would be either sent to Siberia or something. So parents were afraid to let their kids do it. So now there is a beginning of a rebirth. And so through museums, through people like me and others, we are able to take it back. And you got it? Yeah, I'm doing.
Find it.
Please hold me. And we're beginning to pull things out of the archives and teach and show and demonstrate, but there are certain things that are gone. One of the things was a very special way of wrapping their heads. And we finally, no one knew. The elderly, now that the scarves came in, those babushkas came in, they just tie the scarf and they go. But the old ways where they used to do all this beautiful wrapping, it's gone. So we found a 90-year-old woman with the fingers like this trying to claw her way to pull a 4-yard long piece of cloth and scarf. And but it's coming back. It's coming back to life. And I'm glad to be able to stand here, to be that grain of salt or a grain of sand that I'm able to give it back. So you can't find my word.
Yes, we have Vera brought a wonderful set of presentations that unfortunately have disappeared from the desktop, but we are passing around a book that she's collected with her work from the head wraps that she's been able to create and recreate from prior examples. It's being passed around now.
I have 2 minutes. What I have done is, in conjunction with the museum in Ukraine, is we started a campaign of looking for headpieces. And that's what my booklet that's going around is. Because Ukraine is so, it's so many regions, so many different regions. Each region is a different look, a different style, a different colors, a different everything. So now this is what I'm doing. It's going around looking for reproducing these things and trying to put it back. And I did one show last year, and hopefully I'm doing another one next year with the full costumes and the headpieces and the headgear that goes along with it. It's a very, very tedious work. For a year, I became a hermit. I would not leave the house. All I did, but I'm happy. I'm happy to be able to share this in Ukraine. The other thing is that Ukraine is beginning to revive their culture by doing festivals. And they would say, one more minute, by doing festivals. And when a festivals, they say, come dressed in your garbs, come dressed in your embroideries. So now it's beginning this revival, this revival of, hey, it's nice to do it. And more of the young are coming back and learning and doing. So this is where I am at. I'll be able to answer anything you want, but thank you. Thank you for this platform. Thank you. Sorry. I don't do well in public speaking. I am behind the scene person.
She says she's behind the scenes, but no one can give a better impression of the rewards and the emotion involved in cultural work, in repatriation work, in exchange of knowledge, in trying to find people who wish to learn. And it also, her story clearly challenges the concept of a nation state with fixed borders. Culture doesn't have fixed borders. In fact, some of the most knowledgeable people happen to be in that field in Philadelphia. The last speaker in the session this morning is Dr. Elizabeth Peterson from the American Folklife Center. She has been the director of the American Folklife Center at the Library of Congress since 2012. Prior to her appointment as director there, she was a consultant specializing in folklife-related cultural planning, programming, assessments, development, meeting facilitation, writing, and research. Her primary clients at that time included the American Folklife Society, the Wyoming Arts Council, the Association of Western States Folklorists, the Houston Arts Alliance, and the American Folklife Center at the Library of Congress. In her consulting work, she helped, for the American Folklife Center, she helped design a national documentation project focusing on the transformation of work in the 21st century American life. She brought together scholars and others from folklore, oral history, anthropology, public policy, private philanthropy, the National Endowment for the Arts, for the Humanities, and also the Institute of Museum and Library Services. And prior to her work as a consultant, she was executive director of the Fund for Folk Culture. She co-founded Preserving America's Cultural Traditions, a coalition of folklore nonprofits and federal agencies whose members meet annually for knowledge sharing and collaborative planning. She was also co-founder and program coordinator of the Texas Folklife Resources and director of the Traditional Arts Program at the New England Foundation for the Arts. She wrote, edited, and compiled The Changing Faces of Tradition, a report on the folk and traditional arts in the United States. Dr. Peterson holds a BA in English from the University of Redlands and has a PhD in folklore from Indiana University. She's written and edited a number of professional works, including handbook reports, white papers, and commissioned articles for such organizations as the National Endowment for the Arts, the Southern Arts Foundation, the Pew Fellowships in Arts and Animating Democracy. Elizabeth, come take the microphone.
In other words, I'm old. Now we go from poetry to prose. Thank you, Vera. I also wanted to thank the Smithsonian for the invitation to be here today with everyone and to offer greetings and welcome to our esteemed colleagues from Kenya and China. Taking Sally at her word of talking and from personal experience about observations, perceptions, activities related to transnational culture and folklore, I thought I would actually focus a little bit on a couple of experiences that I've had over the years. And so I'm talking as an individual, not as a, only partially as a federal employee and bureaucrat, but I also think some of my experience underscores what Robert had observed earlier about the United States context of dealing with traditional arts and culture, which is that it is extremely decentralized and sometimes connected, sometimes fragmented, but many concentric circles of people working in various fields and disciplines who sometimes connect and sometimes do not see themselves as having peers in other areas. It has its advantages and it has its disadvantages. It's tricky talking about local culture, local knowledge, which is ultimately what we've all been talking about here today, but from different perspectives, federal, national, international, NGO, local, regional, and it's often where those regions or areas overlap where a lot of the frictions and bottlenecks are that I think hamper our work. But I just wanted to talk about two. I've worked in an NGO or in the NGO nonprofit universe actually for most of my life in a range of different nonprofits and have only recently come to the federal government in the last few years. And so I wanted to, I guess, talk about safeguarding from those two different perches because they end up being different things. And I think over my career, the trajectory of my career, I have ended up really focusing on safeguarding and sustaining culture, maybe sometimes successfully, I know sometimes not. But in my work at the Fund for Folk Culture, which Tony mentioned, the Fund for Folk Culture was a nonprofit dedicated to serving as a connector or liaison between private philanthropy and the world of traditional arts and culture here in the United States, for the most part. We were able to do a little bit of international work, but not much. In that course, one of the things that we ended up doing a lot was really focusing on issues of capacity building. And I think much of what we have been talking about today and much of what I think folklorists can best offer is that good old-fashioned activity of technical assistance, of connecting, of networking, of bringing traditional artists, craftspeople, practitioners together with the resources that they need to do what they need to do, and to thrive and continue on. And that is what I think the Fund for Folk Culture did a lot. But the way in which I think we sometimes approached cultural capacity was not in the usual ways of board development or, you know, those sorts of things that consultants and funders often want us to do, but really in encouraging conversation. in bringing people together from different disciplines, different fields, having them talk to each other, because I do think folklore, ICH, whatever you may want to call it, is best seen and looked at as it occurs in daily life in relation to everything else. That's where it lives on a day-to-day basis, and so that's where we would approach it. We did a whole series of convenings with immigrant and refugee artists and cultural organizations, social service agencies, funders, activists, and the like in the 2003, 4, 5 period, bringing individuals together. We noticed, as have I think other nonprofits, certainly the Institute for Cultural Partnerships that used to be based in Pennsylvania, that social service agencies were on the front line of dealing with refugees and immigrants. Those were the first point of contact for many traditional artists and cultural bearers that would come to the United States, and would be the point from which they fanned out into other resources and activities. We began to work very closely with them. We began to bring artists together with them and develop networks and partnerships. And funding also. We also, in the course of this cultural capacity building, would work with artists, I don't know, I guess I should say, these conversations that we would sponsor, I think at their very best, are cultural organizing. It's bringing people together to, in essence, sort of see themselves as actors and agents in the world, that they can see where they are, and from that point on can begin to fan out and to develop their relationships in relation to other cultures, but to see themselves as actors. And I think you can see that in some of the work that we did, and I know several individuals, National Endowment for the Arts and other organizations here, in the basket makers movement among Native American groups here, which I think is an example of cultural organizing at its best, which was individual artists in different tribes coming together, realizing that they were having trouble with natural resources, getting access to grasses, also encountering issues of pesticides, herbicides, realizing that some of their members were becoming ill, and banding together to organize, to advocate for themselves, to get access to the materials that they needed, to work with government agencies, whether it's the Bureau of Indian Affairs or Forestry and Wildlife, and tribal government, to advocate for what they needed, to carry on the traditions that they needed in the ways that they saw fit. We frequently supported those sorts of activities, and now switching to the federal government. From the Fund for Folk Culture, what we did was very much hands-on, I suppose more in the trenches. Working at the federal government level is a very different sort of perch. And especially working at the American Folklife Center, which was founded in 1976 by an act of Congress and founded to preserve and present American folklife and culture and folklife and cultural traditions from beyond the borders of the United States. From that, we differ a little bit from some of the other organizations and individuals that have been talking here today. While we are certainly concerned with safeguarding and sustaining tradition, we do it from the position or perspective of an archive. And so we are dealing with the products and the documents of all of the materials that individual artists, communities deposit. So we end up asking different questions, and we end up having to deal with different issues. But ultimately, it's still about access and connecting, doing that connecting, networking activity to bring people together with the materials that they need. One of the issues dealing at the federal level, and again, it's this sort of notion of local culture and dealing from a very sort of high perch, and I don't mean that in the sense of hierarchical, but just not being close to the stuff and the people sometimes, is it makes it difficult. One of the things that we are doing as part of the American Folklife Center is working with the World Intellectual Property Organization, and I believe Tony made reference to it earlier. It's sort of a sister counterpart to UNESCO, but operates in a very different realm. It is interested right now in dealing with harmonizing national law related to copyright and intellectual property in the area of genetic resources, traditional knowledge, and traditional cultural expression. It is a very difficult problem, and because we are dealing with national and state actors coming together, trying to deal with, as Tony made reference to, many traditions that do not respect boundaries. People, ideas, cultures are constantly on the move and mobile, and it makes it, these structures that we're dealing with, whether in UNESCO or WIPO, are sometimes a little bit clunky and a little bit problematic in being able to tackle issues of transnational folklore, transnational mobility, and the like. And I would hope that, and actually I guess I would just throw out a question, sort of returning to Tony's comments from the beginning, is I do believe transnational culture, folklore, traditions offer us a wonderful opportunity to not think about folklore or ICH as residual traditions, but it offers us an opportunity to see folklore as it is emerging, as it is taking place, and as it is forming in front of our eyes in real time. The problem is that with government entities and with state or regional actors, it becomes very difficult to deal and tackle those issues. And I would, I guess, urge us, and would be very curious to hear from all of you how you all are tackling those issues. What are some successes? What are other problems that people are encountering? And with that, I will just stop. Thank you.
I could have listened to you all afternoon. Would the other speakers come back to the table? Want to come back? Because we have, I know you fled, but you can't be a refugee in the corner. You have to be here with us. We have about 20 minutes before the coffee break, and I know you're all ready for the coffee break. But do you have any questions or comments you would like to address in general or to the members of the group? And if you do, please raise your hand so we can get a microphone to you. These are being recorded and, of course, translated. Atesh, I think, is the first. Does anybody else? Raise your hands and I'll put you down on the list.
Hello. Betsy, just to your last question, and maybe the other people would care to comment as well, I would say that one of the biggest problems we face at Smithsonian Folkways Recordings, a little nonprofit record label here at the National Museum, is that of, in the realm of intellectual property, control by the community of moral rights, which we have no laws for in this country, and yet trying to set up principles in best practices. And I'd be interested to hear in the rest of the world how anybody else has dealt with that one. I mean, who owns the patterns for your weaving, the essence of no drama, all the stuff that ICH really deals with. And in Lamu, you know, what's going to happen in the face of gigantic tankers coming in.
Well, hello? Atesh, you're right. I mean, that is one of the central issues of ICH, is who owns it, who benefits from it, and the like. And those are certainly the issues at WIPO that everyone is fumbling. I mean, that's where it's all coming to a screeching halt. There is no agreement on it. I think at the American Folklife Center, we have tried to operate on the side of caution and try to operate and safeguard these materials in collaboration with the communities that we deal with, and to understand that while most people think of folklore or cultural materials as public domain, having no author, that we know that that is not necessarily the case, and that many of the materials in our archives are very much the property of individuals and communities, and we need to work with them to make their work accessible. That said, it's an ongoing conundrum, because we don't want to, totally restricting access is also a problem. So it's just trying to find that balance.
With Lamu historically has been a melting pot of culture, as far as back to the 9th century, up into the 18th century. You have these traders coming into the community with their own cultural heritage, infusing it with the arty African culture that's there. One thing that the National Museums of Kenya is working on with the local government is trying, like I said before, capacity building, so then that way we can educate the community on traditional heritage. Every year we have a culture festival that highlights the different communities within Lamu. This year we just had our first Watch Day, which is was promoted by the World Monuments Fund, where we had different stakeholders come together. Believe it or not, the Red Cross participated. The Kenya Red Cross participated. We had just grassroots groups, community-based organizations, basically looking at some of the communities that they work with and some of those dying traditions. Then that way we're going to do an oral history project where we're going to document oral traditions and things of that nature, things that are historically being lost but have been documented in other countries. For instance, the British Museum has, and not to get into with the bigger museums like Smithsonian, International Museums, and the British Museum, but British Museum has the documents, manuscripts of the historical poetry written in Arabic from Lamu, where Lamu only has maybe a few manuscripts left. So it's like we want to work with the international community, but we want the international community to come in and help train in ethics and morals and intellectual property and how we can protect it at home.
That's a very good question. Nations are not united and they aren't monolithic, and so you do have groups in a national copyright law that are specifically excluded from having their particular arts recognized as property at all. Similarly, I think communities are also, we think of them as being united, but in fact they're often very divided. And I think one of the reasons that you often get a mediator involved in community activities is the outsider can often get everybody talking together that would refuse to talk to each other if they didn't have an excuse to talk to each other. So I think we have to be careful about our imaginings of what community is and also our imaginings about what nations are, because they aren't unitary and they are full of divisions. Adrian Kepler had a question next. And if anybody else wants to ask a question, if anyone wants to ask a question, please raise your hand and I'll write you down.
Thank you. I have a question for Danny Young or anyone that wants to answer it. As an ethnochoreologist, I loved your performance. And what was interesting to me about it was I'm not familiar with the Chinese form, but I'm familiar with the No form. And it gives me an opportunity to ask the question about preserving and constantly recreating. And as I recall, in the masterpiece form of UNESCO, all of the materials that were made masterpieces were supposed to also be constantly recreated or have the opportunity to constantly created. So I'm wondering if you're looking at the No form as a new creation, because you're not looking at it as preserving, because that's not how No looks, right? So are you preserving it, Are you recreating it, or are you doing something different?
I don't think it's just me. I think the practicing artists, like the No Masters, they know best. I never really tell them what to do. I just tell them that, would you like to free yourself and dig deeper into what you have been doing, and then perhaps tell me if you want to make any change, why do you make that change? And then I can give some comments. I had very in-depth dialogue, particularly with Kun artists, who told me that actually they felt there's a lot of need to change in the way of how they sing, for example. And so intangible cultural heritage is a live arts. These artists are, they are so important. They are the one who has to decide. But me, as a sort of outsider, I facilitate them to look at themselves and to say that, okay, I really want to move forward. Because I had a very in-depth discussion with how they deal with text, for example. And they told me their doubts about some of the text as well. That was very, very interesting, because usually you just, when you put in the museum, you can't touch it. It's like you just make the preservation and that's it. But here, this group of artists who are superb, who are in their 60s and 70s, who told me that, yeah, I think it should be changed. Certain area should be changed. But preservation is preserving their teachers' work, or their teachers' work, or what? And I think all those are important issues that has to be discussed with practicing artists.
So then can I ask Tony about how UNESCO is dealing with the problem of preserving and constant recreation?
Well, as you notice, the key word in UNESCO language is safeguarding, and that's because they didn't want to use preserving, because preserving implies that you put something in alcohol and it pickles and it stays the same forever, or you put it in a museum and you never change the exhibit. So the concept of safeguarding was precisely developed to indicate that what you're doing is safeguarding the conditions of it, but in principle it's allowed to change as it wants. Now, how it's allowed varies from country to country. How that word is interpreted varies. And the writing of the 2003 convention was a very elaborate process. And members of people in this room and elsewhere were deeply involved in debates over every single word in that declaration. Getting a word into a declaration of that importance can be extremely central to the existence of an entire field. And so these words were debated, and then when you read those sentences, they don't make sense, some of them, because they're basically a whole bunch of different people's ideas all strung together. And so the documents themselves are you wonder, why did they ever write them that way? Well, they wrote them that way because everybody was pushing to get certain ideas in there, and so they aren't always consistent. And I think one of the points I made earlier was to get from the documents of the convention and from the classifications of UNESCO to the actual cases on the ground in different countries is an act of interpretation. And I think that key act of interpretation we see very differently in China and in Kenya, and the United States not at all. I always think the United States doesn't have a Ministry of Culture because we believe culture is the marketplace. And that's what we leave it to. And so it's very hard to get anybody to think that culture should be anything but the market. So I may have answered your question. Safeguarding is a key term because it doesn't imply fixing. But it isn't accepted everywhere, and certainly isn't in every government's cultural policy.
So actually every state can interpret it the way they want, because I've talked to a number of people about that they didn't think things should be changed. And I said, well, that's not what's in the documents. Of course they can be changed. And there are certainly some states that believe they shouldn't be changed. Yes. So that's okay, is what you're saying.
No, I'm not saying it's okay. I'm saying that's what's happening. UNESCO really would like things not to be fixed. I mean, that was the
Right.
decision, and that's different from 1989, I think. The idea is that with
Right.
safeguarding, we won't fix it. We will give the community of knowledge bearers the chance to do what they want to do and then to change it as they wish. It's just that making that work in every country that's a very foreign concept in lots of places. In fact, a lot of things in those UNESCO documents are very foreign, in the sense that they're very Europe-centric, perhaps, and they're very within a certain language and way of thinking. So it is. I don't think UNESCO would agree that no, go ahead and do whatever you want. But I think, in fact, you're getting interpretations in different countries, but we're learning. Yes.
Thank you.
Diane. Did you have a question, Barry?
Oh, thank you. Yes, I did. Along the lines we've been speaking about in terms of safeguarding, my question related to capacity building within communities as a form for safeguarding culture and making sure that tension is sort of managed from a community standpoint. So I really wanted to hear from panelists a little bit more about how you see capacity building within the context of safeguarding.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think capacity building, but you see, when you talk to an artist, he's or she is practicing. So he needs someone to facilitate, or he or she needs someone to facilitate, to mediate, to help to do this capacity building. I think earlier when it was said that I think an artist has to deal with the market. How strong can he or she deal with the market? Because they have to survive. And how strong can they deal with the political intervention? How strong can they deal with the legal system? They are not lawyers, so who can protect them? So I think the key thing is capacity building, going back to the basic education in the community, to understand, first of all, how to consolidate the community themselves, to empower themselves. So then they will know how to deal with outside intervention. Outside intervention meaning economic or political or international intervention. Sometimes I feel UNESCO is international intervention. Because if you talk to an artist, they don't know what UNESCO is all about. It's just like what Tony said. They don't even understand some of the text of all this interpretation. And to have the practicing artist to deeply understand that, I don't think, I think it's a very big task. But I don't think they should spend all the time in trying to understand UNESCO documents. But then, of course, in China, there's not as many lawyers in America. So when you talk about intellectual property, we sometimes go back to, the local community, how they protect themselves. I think empowerment also has to deal with self-confidence among the artists themselves, and how they organize themselves so they can really know where they are. It's a long path. But when we talk about No and Kun, I think the No are doing okay. The Kun is still very much struggling. But then the whole issue of preserving what? For who? Okay, for politicians? Or are they preserving for their master, their teachers? Or what? Okay, so those are some of the issues that's been discussed.
No, go ahead.
Just really quickly, because it's what I talked about when I was at the podium, that we're actually trying to, through the World's Monuments Fund, and me being the spokesperson for Lamu, trying to implement capacity building for the craftspeople in the community, because they're being left out of the business of tourism with the port coming. Basically, you have all of these commercial artists appearing in Lamu with commercial art and things that are not from Lamu or don't connect to the people of Lamu. With that, we're trying to introduce vocational schools, train the tour guides, the local tour guides, the one that the ones that do have the information. But because of a lot of people aren't trained and they don't know the history of their culture, basically they're making it up as they go. And which is, it's sad. So we run into a problem with cultural integrity, that people are, the tour guides are telling you what you want to hear for just a small fee. That's right. For just a small fee. So what we have done, and I sort of serve, and it's really serve as the voice of the community, and I'm actually from the U.S., but I have been able to stand up to, now our government officials are gone, but stand up to the local county government and some of the things that the national government is doing in the community to help them understand what the people need. Because the people's voices aren't being heard, and so when they say we're going to include stakeholders, which are the business people in the community, their idea or what they're thinking of is business. They're thinking about promoting their business and not really connecting to the community. And so with that, the people, the craftspeople, the tour guides, the sailboat captains, the fishermen, all of the cultural heritage that's there, we're trying to organize so then that way we can promote, they can take ownership of it and organize an association. And luckily, Kenya has this new constitution where devolution is included, where everything has been moved from a national level to a local level. And so the local government officials are actually from the community. And they're actually listening right now. And so we have a chance to help the local government build that infrastructure for cultural heritage, to safeguard the cultural heritage there. So that's one of the things that we're trying to work on through the watch list, is that the community is making an effort to work with the local government to build that effort, build the infrastructure for safeguarding the cultural heritage and traditions in that region, and to keep the World Heritage Site status for Lamu.
I actually just wanted to add another example. I mean, I think the big issue is sustainability. I mean, how do you keep cultural capacity related projects going forward? And we actually, in Kenya, with World Intellectual Property Organization in 2008-9, before my time, initiated or worked with the Maasai Cultural Heritage in Laikipia, with Kiplagat, who is with the National Museum of Kenya, who is not here as part of the festival, unfortunately, and Tomei and Ole Tingoi. But it was a cultural capacity building project focused on documentation, teaching means of documenting how to document your own culture so they could use the materials in the ways that they wanted to, whether it is for cultural development purposes or with land use or land claims or whatever. The project ended up going about 2 years. Individuals came over to the United States and worked with the Center for Documentary Studies at Duke University, as well as the American Folklife Center here. Staff from the American Folklife Center, Guha Shankar, who is here in the audience, was one of those individuals, went back to Kenya, as did staff from the Center for Documentary Studies to work there. With individuals. They have received equipment, training, and the like. What I think I would call it a qualified or mixed success is that I do think where problems arise is just in the issue of follow-up and how do you get the momentum going, how do you keep it going, and how do you bring in local, regional, state, national actors? I mean, we had people at different levels working, and that sort of locally based, I think piece was not there, but it sounds like maybe there are some more possibilities now.
May I? I come from a different angle. Yeah, it doesn't bite. No. Sit on. Yeah. I come from a different point out of the closer, I'm an individual who is working with a group of people. My main concern is to teach and to share. As you see, some of my work that was being put out, and I'm also a collector. I collect old things, traditional things that I could learn on. So my main concern is to pass it on through teaching. And I had to go to work to be able to afford my art. So whenever I got a grant, yeah, there's money, could buy more things. And keeping the things, thank God I have a big house, and I only have room to walk, because everything at the moment, I'm keeping it until I know it's safe to give it somewhere where people will be able to use it, and for the right reasons. Right now, I don't want to just give it to a museum where it might be put in storage. I wanted that to be a live issue where people could touch it, could work out of it. And that is my concern. That's where I'm coming from. My main thing is to teach, to pass on my heritage. I don't know if that fits in with all that, but that's my main concern. So it will keep living, being through me, being through anyone. But that's where I'm at. Yeah.
Well, passing it on is absolutely central. We have one more question. Barry, would you like to?
Yes.
I'm sorry. He was first, and then you. Is that okay?
Just a quick comment. I wanted to confirm what you said about the negotiation of the language. It was, we get draft documents back with several thousand footnotes that we always had to work through for the language. But one thing about the convention that I think has been ignored, or at least there hasn't been as much emphasis put on it, and that is that folks have tended to concentrate on the inscription of the traditions. And there was an element of the convention that really is about finding the best strategies for safeguarding. And I think that's sort of been lost in the whole picture, at least in the recent years. And I wanted to ask Vera whether or not your work has been seen, how it's been received in Ukraine, and whether it is being seen as a model now for safeguarding within Ukraine.
Whenever I bring things from Ukraine, I am horrified, because along with it comes moths. And I had a lot of things that got eaten from the thing, because they do have the moth infestation. So I bring it, I either wash it, clean it, and preserve it. Most of my things I document. My weaving, mainly, it's all thank God for my husband, who's great in a computer. He will document. I make a pattern, and I make it how to weave this. He says, so if you die, who's going to know what to do with this? So I say, and that's true. So that's what I'm doing. I'm documenting and keeping it and making sure that it's all well preserved. For what I have, that's what I'm trying to do. And I have sent it to Ukraine and grafted. One of the belt that it was being shown with all those threads and everything, they want to know how I'm doing this, because they cannot get it. So the documentation for me is very hard. That's what I've been doing, because I am here, and many times I have no one to share. There's no one to share with me, because I don't want to say I am out there, but unfortunately, yes, I am out there. And so I really try to learn and keep and preserve, and also document. That's my main thing. And also document the regions where it's from, and more or less, if I know when it was done, I will do that too. I am getting things from Ukraine that are coming in swatches from the archives in Kyiv, where they are so great and generous to share things from the archives. And I sit here, that belt that was being shown, it took about 1.5 years to decipher it, to see what makes all those threads and go every which way. So that's where I'm at.
Thank you.
I hope I answered the question.
May I add something?
We're out of time, and I have one more question. Could we?
Yes.
Could we please? Yes.
Yes, my question is to the panelists, but I think it's for all of us because this is an international cultural dialogue. So I think we are the right people to answer these two questions I have. You know, if you want to protect or preserve culture, it's also affected by several other factors like economics and livelihoods. And I want to give a very good example of my bidding. This bidding was done by my mom and my 2 younger sisters who are in high school. They were doing this because it is connected to their livelihood. At the end of the day, they are able to sell and get money to go to school. But it's unfortunately that the international community are still so much focusing on the elite arts. Arts that are made in the factory, arts that are made in elsewhere, in those people who are able to do. But they are not focusing on how to open the market for this art that propagates that culture. So what can we do to make sure that we are opening this market so that we can propagate? Because you understand that if this young girl can go to school and come and do this wonderful job, is because, not because she likes, but because it's tied to our economic empowerment. But by so doing, we get to open up and we connect with culture and we'll be able to go far with this culture. So I don't know whether that's a question or a comment, but I think that is very important if you can open up the market for this artwork.
Thank you very much. Does anybody want to respond to that? I have a quick response. My short response for safeguarding traditional culture is pay the artists. Because if you pay the artists, it's not just money, it's also prestige, and they will get people to learn from them. So that's my byline. Of course, it sounds very American and capitalist, but it really does work in a few cases, because traditional artists are low prestige and often expected to do whatever they do for virtually nothing. And I think that's part of the reason that we have this imbalance. But does anybody want to say anything to close up? Yes.
I know that in Ukraine, and it's so sad, and I think it relates to you also, is the young people want to go to art school. They want to go and learn all this. And they do the textiles and they do the embroidery, they go through all this college degree and all that. And then they put their things up on the market and nobody wants to pay for what it's worth. So then he compromises himself by doing a cheaper version of thing and shifting, and it's very sad. As you say, as an artist, most of the artists are not paid enough for their work. That is why I am grateful to God that I don't have to work for my art except to sell my work. But I will teach, and even the teaching, I don't charge anyone. You want to learn, come and I'll teach you. But the whole thing is that's what it is. Or the comment is, oh, I could go somewhere and buy a lot cheaper. Go. I mean, go. But, and that's what it's sad. But if you see me later on, I will tell you something what Ukraine does with the market. Okay?
Thank you. Thank you. Does anybody have a last remark, or shall I?
Can I say a few words?
Yes, a very quick remark. Each of you is
I will be
allowed
quicker
one
than
quick
you.
remark.
I think that we need individuals who has the right mind to do the safeguarding, and that individuals or the group of individuals who still have to institutionalize their act. because even though what Tony said about paying the artist, then they spend the money and they survive, and then you know what goes on. I think even though as an artist, I do feel that individual versus the institution is always a constant battle. But we are looking for an ideal institutions. We are looking for an institution which is maybe a non-profit institution, maybe it's not a big-scale institution, not a corporate culture institution, that can do the safeguarding.
Okay. Yes.
I just wanted to say that, and talking about all of the convention, the World Heritage Convention, one of the things that's interesting about everything that we're saying, it was actually UNESCO who reached out to me because of Lamu's World Heritage status was endangered. So because they saw what I was doing in the community, they actually reached out to me and asked me, could I write the nomination and then work with them or work through them to get things in order as far as the heritage impact assessment and the environmental assessment impact assessment, which I think is a little unique here because usually they're more hands-off. And although they contacted me, I actually did it by myself, but you know, you're right, I had to read through all of the convention and things of that nature to try to get through and work with World Monument Fund to deal with issues. And basically, we brought artists here, merchandise that they're selling, and they're making money. That's part of the program, is to pay the artists.
Great. Betsy? Sorry, Elizabeth?
Pay the artists and their strength in numbers. Organize.
And organize. All right, organizing. That's what we're here for, and I would really like to please give a round of applause to our wonderful speakers. Would like to thank those who asked questions, and I would like to invite you, I think the coffee has now arrived, is that right? And so have some coffee, stretch, and then we will have a round table.